Hey YouTubers and plant lovers, it's Justin coming to you from the Big Blue Nation once again. And today I was wanting to discuss Oncidium Orchids. Now, Vandas, I like them a lot because of their shape. They're really unique. Put in boxes, their roots run wild, they look beautiful. Cymbidiums, I like them because they get rather large, and if you include their flowers and racemes, they can be extraordinarily large, actually. And Oncidiums, I like them just because even without a flower spike, their foliage is so beautiful. I mean, the way their leaves kind of come off and the Pseudobulbs, they really do look beautiful, I think. So once the flowers bloom, they really are extraordinary. They are one of my favorite orchids, and I really just can't classify and tell you what number I'd have to rank them as. It'd probably be the second, tied with Cymbidiums. It might even be the first, tied with Vandas. I really don't know. This one right here is my oldest Oncidium orchid. This is actually called the Volcano Hula Halau orchid. I don't really know if I'm saying that right, but it is an Oncidium, and you really should see the flowers when they bloom. They're a beautiful burgundy, and they contrast with a little bit of yellow at the tips, at the bottom of the lip. It's a really, really, really beautiful flower once they do bloom. And this one over here, this is my newest Oncidium. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but I do know that the flowers have some kind of a burgundy in it, and I think it's got a contrast of pinkish, kind of a salmon almost, so I'm anxious to see what that one's gonna look like when it blooms. But I just think that the leaves and the foliage are just beautiful kind of a color, and I love the Pseudobulbs right here. This odd kind of shaped part right here, that is called the Pseudobulb. It does store a little bit of water, and it gives rise to flower spikes and just different foliage. And actually, when these plants are full grown, they'll have about 10, maybe 11 or 12 pseudobulbs in a fully grown plant. So they do get rather large. And a fully grown Oncidium will have about 10, maybe a couple more of the pseudobulbs, and they do get rather large. So you do need to leave a little bit of room for them. Now, the light for the Oncidiums, they don't prefer a bunch of light. I'd say kind of dappled. A little bit more than a Phalaenopsis, but a little bit less than a Vanda. So kind of right in the middle with the Cymbidium. The Oncidiums do like dappled light. I would put it in a south-facing window with a sheer curtain again. That'll help kind of filter some of that bright, intense light out, and let the leaves really do their thing without being scorched. Water the plants like a moderate amount of water. I would definitely recommend you letting the medium dry out in between waterings, but as soon as it dries out, I would go ahead and give it another thorough watering. And by thorough, I just mean that enough water that it would rinse out the bottom, and that's going to ensure that all the roots have gotten adequate water, because roots that stay dry for a long time will end up dying. So you do want to make sure that every single root is going to get water, and just make sure it will run out the drainage holes. Now, Oncidiums are kind of a little bit harder to take care of in the home because they are found at different temperature ranges. They can be found at sea level in tropical areas, or they can be found at higher elevations like in the Andes. So finding exactly what temperature might be best for your Oncidium is going to be a little bit harder. But as a general rule, I wouldn't recommend it getting any lower than 50 degrees at night, and no higher than about 90 during the day. Actually, it can get up to 95 and 100 as long as you have adequate humidity and air circulating the plant. If it's going to be kind of windless and no humidity in sight, I wouldn't leave it out if the temperature is going to be over 95 degrees. Now, humidity, I would go ahead and put this back in the same category as a Cymbidium. They don't need a whole bunch of humidity like a Vanda orchid does. So I would say anything from about 50 to 65% humidity is going to be ideal for your Oncidium. So that might be a little bit tricky to have to do in the house, but I'm able to do it, so as long as you're able to keep it around 50 to 60%, I think your orchid would be just fine. With fertilizer, I would say any good 20-20-20 fertilizer would be ideal for your orchid in the summertime, also in the spring, and the beginning of fall. But I would do that about once every 2 weeks in the growing season. And while you're in the growing season, in between each feeding, I would go ahead and make sure you water it really thorough. That's gonna help move the salts so that they don't accumulate around the roots and kind of do some damage. So with a lot of fertilizers, you do run the risk of the salts kind of poisoning or hurting the plant, especially if they just sit there. So in between fertilizing, I would give it a good watering to make sure all that's moved around. But I would not fertilize the plant if you had just repotted it, because I use the Miracle-Gro orchid bark mix, and that stuff already has adequate feeding in there. And so if you fertilize it on top of that, you're just going to burn the plant out. Now, when I was talking about water, any plant that has thicker leaves and thicker roots, they can require a lot less watering than a plant with thin leaves and thin roots. Now, the pH for this soil of this orchid, I would say about 5.0 to 8.0. They like it to be slightly acidic to slightly neutral. So I wouldn't go too far with the acidity, but they do like some acidity in their pH. And fully grown, these orchids can actually get to be about a half a meter in height. One of the other ones, Oncidium Altissimum, actually they can get up to be about 15 feet in height. So they can be rather large, but most of them would be at home, kind of in your windowsill or on your tabletop. Now, orchids do not, as a whole, do not have a scheduled blooming season. Just as long as a few of the criteria are being met, the flowers will bloom at any time during the year. And the only kind of criteria you need to make sure is that it's getting enough water, enough light, and a lot of times people struggle finding enough light. And if you're meeting that requirement with enough water and enough light and you're still not seeing any blooms, try lowering your temperature. A lot of orchids bloom when the temperature drops kind of slightly, so around 50 to 60 degrees I've noticed will kind of help a orchid kind of bloom. And just like any other plant, these Oncidiums do have kind of a little bit of problem with pests. You'll want to watch out for aphids, especially if your medium stays wet. And since they do like a lot of humidity, I would recommend that you put a fan out where the orchids are. That will help dissolve or evaporate the water more quickly and make it a little bit more uncomfortable for the pests. Spider mites are another one that kind of run rampant with the Oncidiums. And I believe scale, I've never seen scale on an Oncidium, but I wouldn't rule that out. So while you're watering your plant, it's a good time to kind of get familiar with it and see if there's anything out of the ordinary that doesn't look right, and hopefully you'll be able to catch it early if you're paying attention. Now, transplanting your orchids should be done around the springtime. I wouldn't do it too early in the spring. About halfway through the spring, almost summertime, is a good time to do it. So like I said earlier, you want to make sure that your pot has enough drainage holes in it that it would be able to let adequate water out of the bottom. And you're going to want to use something for a larger root-based medium, kind of like orchid bark or any kind of, I've seen a lot of people use clay pellets as well, though I've had extreme amount of luck with the pine bark. So anything that will bring a lot of air and oxygen to your roots is going to be ideal for the orchid as well. Now, with artificial lights with these Oncidium orchids, I would say about 4 fluorescent tubes supplemented with incandescent bulbs placed at about 6 to 12 inches away from the plant would be enough light to get your orchid going and keep it growing. The metal halide and sodium vapor bulbs are really good, and they don't have to be as close to the orchid to really get it growing. Alright tubers, that's really all I have to say about Oncidium orchids. Hopefully I've instilled enough interest in this plant for you all to go out and get one of your own. But go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know if you've had any kind of success or failure with these orchids. And don't forget to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. Okay, tubers, that's really all I have to say about this plant. If you want to see my last video, click here. If you want to subscribe to my channel and see more videos like this, be sure to click here as well. Alright, tubers, take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, plant prudently.